Start. So welcome to everyone. Some familiar faces. All of you are familiar faces, but some are first time to the Satsang. So for those of you who don't know what Satsang is, last time I explained a little short while, but Satsang basically means to be in the presence of truth, to sit in the presence of truth, to be together or a gathering of truth. So it's nothing other than, which is rare in this world nowadays, but being in the presence and contemplating and sitting and marinating in the truth as opposed to what the world is doing most of the time, which you could say is the untruth in a way. Being lost in the physical existence, being identified with the mind and the bodies and the time and everything like that. So Satsang is a place where we come together to be as much as we can in and as the truth. Now, of course, in the Western world nowadays, people would say, "Why? How could you even say that? Because truth, what is truth?" You know, especially considering the scientific intellectualism that we have in the world now. Everybody could argue and say, "Well, what is the truth? Your truth, my truth, and all that kind of stuff." So it's quite an endeavor to try to find something that could be said to be truthful, absolute, real, as opposed to an opinion or something that can be discussed, evaluated, and turned around and given an opposite to, which is what mostly happens in debates and in the world we see today. And that's a big problem as well, to try to describe the truth, because we are trying to use language in a way, although there is something more happening than just language. We're trying to use a descriptive function, which is language. Nowadays we speak different languages all over the world, and each language is nothing but a descriptive function, an indicative. They're trying to describe something. For example, a chair, the word chair doesn't really mean anything more, especially not more than the chair itself. So it's just a word in which we try to say that. And in Spanish we would say silla, and in Dutch we would say stoel, and all these different languages we would say different words because they're nothing but descriptors. And so we're trying to use an untruth, words, descriptive faculty, language, to try to describe something that is absolute. So it's quite a task, and in a way that's why we use often analogies, examples, to try to bring a certain feeling for it, because really what we're describing is the indescribable, the unformed. In the absolute sense, this is all an effect of the one, the undivided, the absolute. And so we're trying to, in a world of effects, trying to get back to the source of the cause. And we're using these causal, these effectual words and descriptive functions for it. So we often use little examples to try to give it something that you can relate to. And today I kind of picked one model, a model that a lot of us have heard of, but many of us never really understood, because science, which is these days modern religion, science is the biggest religion at this moment on earth, claiming to have the truth, knowing the truth, and nonetheless also the most destructive era that we've had in our history because of science. The very science that claims to be the one who is knowing the universe better than anybody else is also the one that made all the devices and machines that are stripping the planet from its trees, and the oceans from all the fish and all the poisons that we have in our products and all the cancers we get from it. So in a way, the very science that now claims to be the absolute knower of our universe, the physical universe they claim, which we'll see later is really not physical at all, but energetic. They are the religion of these times. So, but what we're doing here tonight, we're giving you an example. I'll use this model to build on and come back to, which is what we all heard about dimensions. We've all heard, the dimensions we live in. We live in 4D as it is. Most people would say we're living in 3 and 4 dimensional We're four-dimensional beings. And the problem is that for a lot of people, they have now come up to a point where the third and fourth dimensions are no longer serving them. And so they're pressed up against the fifth dimension, like being pressed up against a glass wall, and you have to go through, but you can't go through it. You become a fifth dimensional being, which we really are, and even higher. But that really causes unhappiness, because when a certain level of something has completed for you, and you're ready to enter the next level of being, in this case the fifth dimensional state, and you're not going in and you're kind of lagging and staying in that level, it would be like staying in kindergarten or in third grade and repeating over and over the physical experiences you already had. So first I'll give a little description of the dimensions. Science would have us, and it's a good model, we'll use it for now. It's never really well explained. But basically, what we call one dimension is left and right. So you can imagine a completely fine, thin line, like a spider's web. One single thread going from left to right infinitely, as far as the universe goes. That's one dimension, left and right. And then you go into a second dimension, and you have also now forward and backwards. So the line is still flat. It is left and right infinitely, but it also goes now back and forth. So you get what you would call a plane, a two-dimensional plane. But it is still, there's no thickness at all. We can't imagine that because we live in the third and fourth dimension, so we always seem to have a thickness to it, but you would see it as an infinitely thin dimension. Then you go towards the third dimension, and you get volume, because now you also have up and down. So now you get a cube if you wish. But infinite space, we would call that. And that's why we can't imagine an end to the universe, because in three-dimensional space you won't have an end, because it goes infinitely forwards and backwards, the first dimension, the left and right, forwards and backwards, second dimension, and then up. And then you come to the fourth dimension, which is what we call time. Now, although the first three dimensions could be said to be distance, and going backwards and forwards, time in a way is also distance, it's duration. So it is, we would call it past and future. Okay. And so now you have, let's say, an object, whatever the object may be. Let's say, for example, I have this little thing here. This is a three-dimensional object. And it's not just fixed. You can follow it, right? So it's moving through space and time. And the reason we seem to see motion, right? There's the duration of this third-dimensional object moving, right? And the reason this is important is because there's a couple of things I want to use as an example because of this. One of them is, imagine if you were a third-dimensional being like a bug, an insect, and you were flying through the life of a one-dimensional line. The line goes infinitely to left and right, but it has no consciousness about anything around it, because this line is a conscious being. So one-dimensional conscious being, right? And so the fly is flying around, and maybe once in a blue moon does it pass through the line. And whenever it does pass through that conscious line, this aware line, then there's a blip to that line. Suddenly the line is exalted because there is experience in it, you know? Because for the rest, it doesn't know about anything around there. And for a two-dimensional plane, it would be the same thing. You'd have an infinite plane going backwards, forwards, left and right, but it doesn't go up and down, so the bug is flying around and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't exist to a two-dimensional being. It doesn't exist to a two-dimensional conscious plane being, right? And then suddenly it passes through and it's boom! You can see it like a force field consciousness, and suddenly blip! And it may pass through it maybe a minute later, bloop! And so suddenly this two-dimensional plane being would be something, it came out of nothing and it disappeared again back into nothing. And it's like, wow, there's these weird phenomena going on, right? Now you have a third-dimensional being, and this is where we live, but we also live as a fourth-dimensional being in time. There is this volume, right? And now as third-dimensional beings, we can't imagine, but if you see people, for example, when they talk about UFOs, things like that are, for most people that haven't seen, but those who have seen them, they'll say they came out of nothing, and then they just materialized and they dematerialized again. And that is very logical. If you were a plane being, a two-dimensional being, and another dimensional being would come into existence only when it flies through that disk. Bloop, and it's like, oh, I just saw something out of nothing. It came and there was this thing, and then suddenly zoop, dissolved back into nothing. That's very logical for the ones you understand that at the different dimensions. However, the next step from fourth dimension will be the fifth dimensional being. And that's where we're really coming to for Satsang. In Satsang, what we're talking about is moving on from that third dimension and fourth dimension, which seems to be our home. But for several people, for many people, it has no longer given them any satisfaction. And so, besides the point that this third, fourth dimensional existence is now being pressed and forced up to the fifth dimensional being, because if we don't evolve into that, we will just destroy everything. We are become unsatisfied with everything. We want more and more objects, gathering more and more experiences, more and more material things, more and more holidays and movies. And like I said last time, the movies are sped up to such a speed that you now have, fraction of a second images. Because we've come to that point where the third and fourth dimension are consuming us. Because we've got the best out of them. We've juiced the best part out of that. And now we have to evolve into fifth dimensional beings, which we really already are. It's nothing other than really discovering what you already are. It's not like we have to create something. And this brings me to another point, which is the dimensions are actually starting at the seventh dimension. You could call it the 7 levels of mind or the 7 dimensions. And what really happens in existence is the 7th dimension is like a light shining through the 7th dimension, is like a prism, like a lens. Like the movies used to be when they would still roll through film. The light shines through the film and casts a shadow on the screen. And so the light shines, the light of the infinite consciousness of the Almighty, of the universe, whatever you want to call it. It's just words, but the point is of a high energy. We call it cosmic power. And this cosmic power shines through the lens and casts a shadow onto what now becomes level 6. And then that shadow, that light keeps shining through the next lens and casts another shadow on level 6, 5, and then 4 and 3, and that's how it goes down. So it's not really that we are creations like the scientists think, who start at the point of the Big Bang, which is what they would call 0 dimension, because they would reduce that line, they would reduce it to not even left and right, which gives you this speck. And that's why science deduces erroneously that everything came out of nothing. So it was a Big Bang, they think, because they believe in physicality. And so they said out of nothing came everything miraculously and just organized itself into this incredible thing that we could even see here as we sit. Incredible stuff, supposedly, according to science, with no intelligence behind it. However, science is looking through the wrong end of the lens, and when you look at it through a telescope, and you're looking through the wrong end of the lens, you don't see anything close, you see everything far, it shrinks everything. So they're looking literally back to front. And so instead of looking and seeing that everything created lower and lower and lower and lower shadows, lower manifestations, which are representations of a higher state, like the shadow cast of the higher state upon a lower state, finally ending up in nothing, the one dimension, which is the ultimate shadow, which is the lowest, densest, smallest, limited form of consciousness that there is, this speck. They think it actually came out of this speck and exploded into everything. It's the absolute other way around. Everything casts shadows down to nothing. So most of us who are in a position or in a place in your life where you're looking for more than what our world has offered, more than what the schools have given us, more than the TVs have given us, more than all the nonsense that we now see in the world, and all the happy hours and all the trying to gather more money and more objects. For those who have come up that the physical three-dimensional existence of objects and the body including in that no longer give an ultimate satisfaction, and for whom also time has become a burden. Because you see, one of the effects of the third dimensional existence is that in the time dimension, what is created is a faculty called memory. So as we seem to think that there is movement, because there's not really movement, because there's only now. There's only always now. There is never any other moment than now. However, the memory captures certain things and says, I remember when you threw those keys, and that was just several seconds, and 5 and 6 seconds, and it starts to map everything in a form of time. Then creating a memorial image, creating this function, which is not a real function, but it's a real function, but it's not a real thing. But it creates this memory function which says, oh, I was a child, and I was born on that day, and I was raised in this country, and I moved there, and I studied this, and it creates this illusory, if you wish, map of a time frame type of experience. That's why we seem to be living as people or persons in a world of time. That is a function that comes along with the 4D, the time frame, the dimension of time. However, for most people, that function becomes their tyrant. And so now the thinking capacity, the remembering capacity, and therefore the projective capacity to project into the future and think that you know what's going to be next week and whether you're going to have enough money or not, or what's going to happen to your family, or whatever you worry about, is a function of 4D reality. In the physical, we know we have to watch out for cars, and we have to do these things. We know that the physical type of three-dimensional, but added on top is this time dimension, which has a memory function, which becomes the torturing factor for most people. Because once you have outgrown this fourth dimensional level, where you no longer need to be constantly living in this fictional memory system, which is constantly throwing thoughts about everything in a repetitive way to the point of nauseum, it's when it starts to become a torture. Now come in probably where most people have touched on, things like meditation. And people start to become interested in subjects like these because the meditation suggests a state in which you can stop this incessant, torturous, tyrannical thinking memory function, because it's become so strong and no longer serves the purpose of making the being itself happy or keeping the being happy. And so we come to the point in which we're mature enough to start making the move from third and fourth dimensional into the fifth dimensional being. And the fifth dimension being something most of us can't imagine because we're living as third, fourth dimensional creatures. So if you would ask a two-dimensional plane being, which is just a disk, what the hell that insect is coming through all the time, considering the fact that that disk is completely flat, it would be like an MRI scan. You know how an MRI scan makes slivers of the brain or the body anywhere so they can see at a dissection of the body what it looks like. Well, imagine getting only one dissection for a blip of a second and trying to make up whether this is an insect coming through this two-dimensional conscious MRI scanning device. That would be called a two-dimensional being, right? A conscious being of two dimensions. Of course, that would be ridiculous to try to assume that the two-dimensional being has any real view of what this three-dimensional, four-dimensional, but in this case then four-dimensional because it's moving through the plane, insect would look like. And so for us in the fourth dimension, it seems, and I emphasize the word seems, impossible to imagine the fifth dimension. And in a way, it is true that it is impossible to imagine because you can't imagine it with the imaging mind, with the memorial mind, with this three-dimensional thinking device. You have to be able to be willing to enter and taste this other state. This state in which all the sages and all the gurus and all the masters and all the wise men of all ancient times have said that you know that you're one with the whole universe, with God or Allah or life or Vishnu or whatever you want to call it, right? All these names they give this, but the infinite being, the eternal, is state in which you know yourself to be one with everything, which is the problem we're seeing on the earth right now. Most people do not see themselves as one with everything, as a part of everything, and so they try to gather as much as they can for themselves. You know? They try to gather as much money and objects, experiences, and it's not doing the job anymore. So it is time for some of us to move into that, and otherwise we will annihilate everything that we are in the third and fourth dimensions, because we are frustrated children who want to go to the next class, and the fourth dimension does no longer serve us. But then, of course, this is a strange difficulty. How the hell do you move into something that can't be imagined, can't be visioned, can't really be put into words, can't be thought of? The thought faculty that we now have inside in the scientific world, in what we call the material intellectualism world, can try to do all kinds of descriptions of this fifth dimension, but it will be just words from the third and fourth dimension, and they won't satisfy. Like I said last time, if you have never eaten the sapote fruit, then you don't know what it tastes like. And science would say, well, I can try to give analogies and say, well, it's like a mango, or it's like a this, or it's like a that, and it's a little bit sweet and bitter and this and that, and leaves a little thing in your mouth or whatever. And that's what science tries to do. But you cannot know the fifth dimensional state until you are immersed long enough in that state, so that it becomes your first nature, so that the third and fourth dimensional start to become more of a background, and the fifth dimensional state becomes the foreground. And that's what we're here for, to actually taste, at least taste, and if you can, simmer and marinate in this state, so that you become acquainted with the fifth dimensional state, which is called in many different names. Being is a beautiful name. Presence is a name. You could say awareness, being aware of being aware. But being is a very good word. Picks you, huh? So that's what we're here for. So we'll do a little meditation to give you we'll go into this place, this placeless place, this non-locational place, this place where there is no position to it, because this is the key to this fifth dimensional being. This is the fifth dimensional level of being, which we always are, but are not acquainted with because we neglect it. It's not something we're going to create. It's something we're going to shift our attention to. So we're not going to make anything up. We're not going to fantasize about anything. We're going to go into that place. And so for that we would call on what they call meditation, which now has become a dirty word in the West, but we will call it the meditation for the sake of doing it, or otherwise call it the state of being, entering the fifth dimensional state of being. To do this, it's always best to close your eyes. The reason is that the eyes are a very big input and a distraction, therefore, of the third dimensional objects of length, width, breadth, height. And you relax your body. You don't have to sit in any particular position, but you just want to be relaxed, and preferably with the back straight up, as good as the spine can be erect. That keeps the body from falling asleep. It keeps you present. This is what I said last time, is the only real asana of yoga. The first primary and really the only necessary real asana there is the asana of sitting in a position of silence. That means the body is quiet and you still the mind. The only asana is really the posture of no thought. Now, to do that, to facilitate us in this meditation, we use anchors. And so we can use the breath. You can focus on your breath. You don't have to change the breath, but you can just follow the breath with your attention. Immediately, we can already see that I, the intelligence, which is the intelligence that you are using right now, can put my attention on something. So there is this I, the attention, and it's looking at the breath. the first thing that shows is that you are not the breath, because you are the one watching it. But more important for now is that you just relax the body and drop any stress or strain that you may have, any resilient tension of anything you've been doing today. It tends to accumulate in the eyes. You drop it from the eyes, you look at the eyes. While breathing deeply down, be aware of the breathing. Dropping the tension from behind the eyeballs. With your attention, you're looking, as it were, not with the eyes, but with the inner eye, let's say, the attention, at the sockets at the back of your eye. And just feel if there's any tension in the eyeballs, and allow that to drop. Anything you drop, you literally kind of imagine it to drop down to the stomach. In fact, it really does drop to the stomach, because the stomach also digests emotional residue, tension, not just food, physical food, but also emotional tension. That's why the dogs lick their wounds after a fight, to relax and allow the tension to be dropped. Now feel if there's any tension in your jaws. If there's any tension in the jaws, feel the presence of what kind of energetic presence is there, and allow everything to drop down through the throat. Feel the throat also can be tense. Drop that tension down. And now put your attention on the shoulders. You're looking, as it were, with the inner eye of your attention at the shoulders. Now, many of you know why people like massages so much. People like massages not just in all the parts of the body, but especially in particular body. And in many cases, the shoulders are one place that most people need massages, because tension tends to accumulate there. So allow the tension to drop from your shoulders. And now focus on your hands. You're looking with your inner eye at what is going on in your hands. The hands are very, very easy to feel, to sense, because the hands are used so much. Without moving them, you can feel a kind of tingling, aliveness in your hands. And you can do all kinds of exercises while breathing calmly. For example, you can feel the nail on the pinky of your right hand. You can actually put your attention and feel an energetic sensation that seems to be located in what we would call the nail of your right hand's pink. Still focusing on the breathing, keeping these anchors, because what we're doing right now is we're really just getting our attention off the external world and at least returning to this inner space of silence, where usually the mind would go and chatter about all the things it wants to do and all the places it wants to visit and all the worries it has about its financial life and whether this person said this or that, did that, and what you're going to do tomorrow if you're going to speak to them or whatever. The mind tends to just regurgitate and go over and over. And so we're not want to focus on that. We want to put our attention instead on something that is relaxing, and preferably something that is always present. Because the sensation of your body and the breathing that you are doing is now. It is here. You're breathing presently. There's no historical thing unless you remember this moment when you couldn't breathe if you have asthma or something that you know, then you're going to start thinking again about breathing. That's what the mind would like to do, to keep you from the now. because the mind has now become this memorial function that is in overdrive in this fourth dimensional level and is now torturing most people on the planet. And that's why they worry about so much that never really comes to pass, because the mind becomes not your best friend, but your worst enemy in most cases. So we're anchoring our attention on something that is here and now, like the breathing. You can feel your legs, your feet, your back, your arms, your jaws, your face. Your lips are easy to feel. Your nose, the tip of your nose is really easy to feel. And so we use these anchors to anchor our attention, not on this ever-moving, restless memory function of thinking, but anchor it on something that is calm, something that's here. That gives you immediate relief from this, what we call rat race, this ever-obsessed world of time and going places and doing things and barely having time to rest, because otherwise we'd have to confront the fact that we have restless emotional tension in our body that is pushing us into ever more existence until we reach that age, whichever age that may be, when we find out we have some disease physically. And we wonder why the hell we have been doing so much, chasing so many dreams that pass. Even if you have billions of dollars, usually these people are even more unhappy than people who have less. And then you reach your whatever age and you're 75 and you have a couple of $100 million and your body is failing and you can't buy your health back. And you don't know what you are inside. And so these poor old men and women usually die with anxiety and fear of death, and not knowing what awaits them, because they're not acquainted with anything else than the physical and mental realms, the three-dimensional objective world of things, including the body, and this fourth-dimensional capacity to think, which is really the result of time, this past and future mechanism of thinking using the memory. And that does die. The body, when it dies, will disappear back into the earth, or whatever you want to call it, energetically, cycled back. And the thoughts and emotions and all the memories of all the great experiences will disappear. And since those who have not looked at what they are as a fifth-dimensional being, the immortal aspect, because the fifth dimension is the level in which you know your immortality. And if you haven't, then you disappear. Rightly so. You're right, you lose it all. Can't take any of the money to your grave. Can't even take your memories there. So most people are rightfully afraid of death because they don't know anything else but the third and fourth dimension and aren't willing to investigate the next level up. And even if they were interested in engaging and discovering the fifth dimension, they usually get all kinds of religions and pseudo-spiritual teachings that love to give you all kinds of entertainment which still keep you grounded firmly in the third dimension of physicality and then the fourth dimension of your memory, and are not willing to really do the real work, which is to strip you momentarily and long enough momentarily in meditation of all that you know through the mind and through the senses. And so what we're doing in meditation and satsang is really we're talking about and then bringing you to that experience of feeling the sensation of the body, calming the mind, and getting comfortably settled into this space where there is so little objective realities, relative realities. You're getting comfortable not having to be busy with the physical world, not moving around from early morning to late at night, but for a few minutes, in this case a little bit longer, but at home this is a good thing to do for as long as you can. Settling down and not being obsessed and absorbed by objects. And also not getting engaged with these objects of thoughts, because there are also objects. They're not physical objects, but we could call them ethereal or mental objects. So we're avoiding these streams of thoughts, these repetitious trains of thoughts, like a train with wagons, with infinite amounts of wagons. You could stand there and watch the train go by, and it's just one thought after the other, and the train doesn't come to an end. Like some countries, you see these trains pass by with over 100 wagons. We're not looking at that. We're getting comfortable to not have to have our attention, which is what we truly are, focused on something. So you're still breathing, you're still focused on the inside, and you're feeling you're alive, aren't you? If I say a very simple question, are you alive? You don't have to think about your body, you don't have to feel your body, you don't have to think about anything. You know you are alive. How do you know you're alive? Because you are. Well, you can dispute the word alive and whatever that means, but the point is, are you here? Are you aware, in other words? And it doesn't matter who you ask this question, anybody that is not intended on trying to get a discussion or some intellectual discussion or something will say, of course I am. And if they say anything else, you would still have to conclude that by answering the question in any way, shape, they were aware of my question, so they must be aware. So I am this awareness. And when I say I do not refer to the man sitting on this chair speaking. I refer to the only I that exists in the entire universe. The one I. And that is the I that is aware right now. So you see that you are aware. There is something that is aware, and it can be aware of something other than it. This is what they call the subject and the object. So I am sitting here on this chair, which is not the physical body, but there's something that is aware of the physical body. So I am aware, and I can be aware of the body. I can be aware of the sensation. I can be aware of the wind. I can be aware of some of these bird sounds. But then I, the awareness that is aware of that thing, must be different from that thing. This is called the path of neti neti, which is what they call in the Vedic, not this, neti neti. To see that you are not your thoughts, because you are the one that is aware of your thoughts. That you are not your body, because you are the one that is aware of your body or the sounds. So we're already coming home. Coming home to the source. We've relaxed the body. We have nothing to do, nowhere to go. We've taken this time just to relax. And not be obsessed with objects. So that I, the awareness that I truly am from the fifth dimensional plane, can actually just rest in what I am. Without having to think about something. Without having to do anything physically. Just being. And this is why we're called human beings. In Spanish they say ser humanos. Ser humano is, again, human being. Ser is to be. Being is to be. In Dutch we say menselijk zijn. Zijn. Just to be. So let's just be. Instead of being identified with something, instead of being identified with thoughts, being busy with things and objects in the third dimension and the fourth dimension. Just be what we are naturally without any object. Just here now. And if any objects are here, then we have our breathing and the sensation of our body. And the caressing wind across your face and hair. How nice it is just to rest. True peace and rest is always here. Just the beautiful sound of the bird, this night bird that sits on the street at night. It makes this, even the sound of that car, gentle, soft, the rustling of the wind through the trees, the frogs that come out after this rainfall, making these sounds. Feel the wind. Isn't it beautiful just to be able to rest as the pure awareness that you are, without having to focus on the hectic thoughts or physical existence, but just sitting here and feeling the wind. This exercise of meditation, which is really all it is to just be here. It doesn't really mean you're doing anything. You're just not putting your attention on these gross objects, which is what they call the more heavy objects, the objects of trains of thoughts, or the object of running around to the supermarket and doing your job and going from left to right and running into all these people that are all identified as well with the physical world and never give time to the very presence that they are. This aware presence, that it can just rest in itself, as itself. Just being aware. So I ask you again, are you aware? Now this awareness, I mean, you answer yes. There's no other answer that anybody can give than say, yes, I am aware. But does it really need you to be aware of a thing? Does it mean you're aware because you're hearing my voice or feeling the wind? Or are you not always aware? And can you really know this awareness? Because this is where most people get a little bit in a bind. They want to know the awareness that they are as an object. But it's not an object, it's what you are. You can only know something other than yourself as an object. If you ever know anything or see anything or hear anything or taste anything or think anything, you are the one that's aware of that thing, and that thing is not you. There is a subject, you, that is aware, and the object that you're aware of. And the very subject that you are cannot be known other than to be it. To know something must be separate from you. To be something is what you already are, and you don't have to know it in an objective way because it is what you are. You are the very awareness. There is nothing that exists in this world unless you are aware of. There must be awareness first. So whenever you want to open your eyes, you can. You don't have to. Some people like to keep their eyes closed. It keeps the attention less distracted. But can you already feel that you're just alive? You're bathing in this emptiness, but yet this emptiness is rich. The process of disidentification from the third and fourth dimensions and consciously bathing in the awareness. The awareness, or consciousness, or presence, whatever you want to call it, being simply present, being simply aware of being aware. It's basically consciousness being conscious of being conscious. In words, it sounds like a whole bunch of swirled up nonsense because it's repeating the same word. Awareness is aware of being aware, but really there's only just this present space of awareness. So are you aware? Now, I would ask you some questions, and without having to answer them verbally, I only want you to look. This is what we would call a guided inquiry. Are you aware is the first one. Now this other question, without having to answer it in words in your head or anything, just look. And the looking is more important than the answer. Because the answer comes in a completely different way when looking is applied as looking itself. First is again, am I aware? The second question would be, can you find a beginning or an end to this awareness? In other words, does the awareness that is aware, this presence, this emanating field of consciousness, this present space, aware space, does it have a beginning or an end? Can, in other words, you find a beginning in space or time? Or an end? Does it stop at your skin? Does it stop a meter outside of your body, or 10 meters? Or can you find any beginning or end to the very awareness that you are being aware with and as now? Can you draw a line somewhere and say, this is where my awareness ends? Has there ever been a moment in your life that awareness was not here? Has your life not been a continuous awareness? Or is there breaks every time you go to sleep, or you go to sleep there's like a total shutdown, and there's, of course in sleep you're not aware of objects, but does awareness ever come to an end? But instead of entering too much in the imagination, it's best to feel right now you are aware, aren't you? And is there some edge? Can you find an edge where your awareness ends? We know the body ends. We know that the body has a certain size and weight. And we know that when you open your eyes, you could look and you can only see so far, depending on how clear the sky is and where you're standing. We know that has an end. We know the third dimensional has an end, it seems, at least for this physical being that we call our body. But the awareness itself, by which you are aware of that body, when we remove the body and remove the attention on the thoughts, can you actually find a beginning or an end to the awareness that you are? And if you cannot find a beginning or an end, then bathing in this place as often as you can will give you the direct knowledge that you are infinite. Because if you can't find a beginning or an end, if you can't find a color or a smell, if you can't go left or right and measure it, if you can't, it doesn't have a sound, if you can't find any edges or beginnings or ends, then you have to rest in that place and feel the awareness, know the awareness, be the awareness, bathe in the awareness, marinate, simmer. Literally simmer in this place. Simmer down. Control your temper. Right? Bob Marley used to sing. Control it so much until you're so silent that you become acquainted with this fifth dimensional plane of being, which to begin with is already beautifully relaxed. Just to be in this place of silence instead of worrying about all kinds of things and busy with all kinds of things. This in itself is already a prize, because this place of being, the fifth dimensional state of being, gives you fruit right away. The quietude, the silence, the rest, the ease, the relaxation is already a prize, even if it's just the well-being that you're focusing on and breathing that you're focusing on. Now in this fifth dimension, it is completely formless. It's infinite, it's eternal, it's endless, but it is rich. You are aware, and this is where you actually come from. This is that fifth dimensional level that can go up to the sixth and seventh and all the way up to the next phase of that, because this universe is infinite and eternal. But for now, we only are concerned with moving from the fourth to the fifth. We're not concerned with sixth or seventh or anything beyond that. One step at a time, like walking up the stairs. Now you can do this as an exercise, but you can also merge with this fifth dimensional state. And this is what the gurus and the sages and the Jesuses and the Buddhas and the Krishnas and many, many masters that live today have reached to a more or lesser degree. Some have reached the fifth, sixth, seventh level. But even just the fifth, it is the entrance into your state of immortality. That's why Jesus said, like I said last time, he said, I and the Father am one. The reason he said, I and the Father am one, he was not referring to Jesus, the physical body, and the Father one. He was saying, I have realized this state of immortality in which I am unified. The unified fields, which is what quantum physics would call it. Where I no longer am identified with the body and the mind, but I am consciously aware of this fifth dimensional state of being in which there is no beginning and no end. Because this state of awareness cannot be touched, cannot be scratched. It cannot be stabbed or shot, because it doesn't have any physical properties. It is the very awareness that makes us aware of the fourth, third, second, all the dimensions below, because if it wasn't for awareness, there will be nothing. Unless there's an observing intelligence that is aware of something, there cannot be anything real. There must be intelligence first. And so the question of real meditation, the question of real spirituality, which now has become a dirty word because so many practices are what you would call pseudo-spiritual practices, which engage in third and fourth dimensional exercises, including a lot of imagination, envisioning, and positive thinking, and which have their place at some stage. But if you really want to make a change in this world on an individual basis for you first, and therefore setting the ground for real evolution, then we're not talking about evolution of any physical creatures, we're talking about the evolution of consciousness. And when Jesus said, I and the Father am one, he didn't say it as a belief, as an intellectual theory, as some kind of a thesis. He was saying, I have rested so much in this space of awareness that I know myself to be one with the whole universe, because I cannot find a beginning or an end to this awareness, so I must be the entire universe itself. And this comes as a realization. The Vedic scriptures would say, call this the vijnana, which is not information, not jnana like knowledge, but the vijnana, the wisdom, which is the Gnostic knowledge that immediately is known and downloaded. The Gnostics from the old days would do the same thing. It's the being and resting in the silence of presence will kind of release from the fifth dimension this intimate, direct, instantaneous knowledge of your infinite being, of your eternal state of what you are, as the very awareness that is listening to these words. Not something that is a theoretical thing. There is now something that is aware, and that's what you should and always do call you. I am aware. However, most people then quickly re-identify with the body or the mind, and when they speak about I am this, I am that, I went here, I went there, they're not really referring to the awareness that was aware of the body and all the things and the thoughts, but they are referring to their body. They're thinking, I am the body, I am my history, I am my memory. And so they live as a physical being, limited to just one little body. They can be hit by a car, or can get cancer, or can be mugged or robbed. And as this creature that has this mind, as this historical figurine this fantastic thing that doesn't exist, because if you show me now who are you as a memorial creature, you can't show me anything because there's only here and now, unless you start bringing up this memory magic of saying, no, I remember clearly last night I was so and so and I did this and that, and yes, well, show me last night's dinner so that I can eat it. If your memory is so real, and if it's so important to live in all the time, which causes torture, tyrannical torture. So the point is to get acquainted with what all of these teachers said. The next dimension. I mean, you hear it so much in the spiritual circles, you know, next dimension, I'm going in the 4th, 5th, 6th dimensional beings, and it's all beautiful stuff. But intellectually, it has no value at all. It's like having a beautiful meal but not eating it. It's just throwing it around at each other in each other's face at the dining table. This is what intellectualism does with spirituality. It takes concepts. It takes all these words, beautiful sounding spiritual words, and then just slaps it around. And I can do this for hours. I could sit here for 5 weeks in a row speaking about this. But the point is, that's not really the real value. It's only if you consume the food and you rest in this 5th dimensional being, you calm all of the identifications with the physical 3D world and the 4D memory stuff, which we call thinking. And you actually bathe and rest in this next level of being. Only then are these words of value. Only then can you taste the 5th dimensional being, become acquainted with it so much that it becomes your next level of being. And it doesn't even take long to do it because you're already it. It just means not giving priority to the thoughts. Not giving priority to all the narratives, all the storytelling that goes on in what the people call their heads, as this regurgitative process of thinking. It means not giving the attention exclusively to physicality in the 3D. Of course you do your thing. Of course you have to go to your work. Of course you have to eat and sleep and shower and take care of the physical body. And of course some things have to be planned. Very few. But it depends on your job. But for most people, very, very few things. Maybe 15 minutes a day can be enough to plan where you're going, what you have to do, the groceries and whatever you have to do. But for the remaining time, why not give your attention consciously, the very attention that you are, the awareness, time to simmer in itself, to rest in itself, and to actually become, which is not really becoming, but unbecoming identified with that, and therefore just being what you already are. Peace and silence and love and joy and well-being, bliss, all these beautiful words are right here, right now. When the thoughts are no longer screening and covering and distracting the full beauty of just the presence. It's already here. There's nothing you have to create. It's just something you have to uncreate. Just be willing to let go of that obsessive need to identify with 3rd and 4th dimensional. So this is really what satsang is. This is really what meditation is. And this is the only real and effectual and effective thing between, entre comillas, that you can do, again, entre comillas, to help your peace, your joy, the harmony of your individual life here as a physical being, as a mental being, as a 3rd, 4th, 5th dimensional being. It's the only real thing that will bring peace to this earth. First at an individual level, so that your life becomes harmonious inside of you, and then around you in your family, and then around you in the society, because you become acquainted with the unified field, the ever-present, eternal, loving, joyful connection of the direct knowledge that I am indeed connected to every single thing, because every single body, every single animal, every single molecule, if you want to use that model, is in fact a manifestation of the unified field, of this present being. But only by resting in this present being will you free yourself from the torturous, tyrannical memory, an obsession with the body, and its closed circle of family, and then a little bit further out it's society, and maybe it's religion or whatever. It's so small, it doesn't care about whether there's 100,000 children dying of hunger every week or whatever it is, 5,000 I think a day. They say these kinds of figures. It only matters when it's your child. People start crying, but they don't cry for the other 5,000 that are dying right now. But once you know yourself to be this infinite being, by resting in it, as it, simmering and marinating as it, will you first bring your life to harmony, and then bring real harmony to this world. That's why Einstein said, you cannot solve the problems that we now see, who have been created by a certain level of consciousness, with that same level of consciousness. You cannot solve the problems with the same level of consciousness that created them. And right now we are living as three-dimensional and four-dimensional, thinking, intellectual, mental, memorial beings who are constantly seeing the function of thinking as the highest function that humanity has reached. And it is by no means the highest. In fact, it's now become the most destructive factor on Earth. And you don't have to take it completely away, but it has to be surpassed individually and collectively. And until we do, we can put band-aids on everything we want. We can try to save the animals and save the forests and do everything we want. But the core problem is that people think of themselves and see themselves as third and fourth dimensional beings. And we've come to the end and therefore are destroying ourselves in it. And so the only real thing anybody can do on an individual and collective level is to do what Jesus did. To do what Buddha did, to do what Krishna did, and to do what Eckhart Tolle did, and Barry Long did, and so many other masters that are alive today have done. And luckily we're living in a time where they're not burned and beheaded, because that's what used to be done by most religions across the earth. That's why we've lost most of all the prophets, most of all the sages, most of all the realized men, because when they came out and explained that it was not some priest, that it's not some other deity, that's not some God up there. It's not something, it's you and I. We all are manifestations of the one, but you have to know it directly. You have to be it, rest in it, marinate in it. Because otherwise it's just an intellectual thing and it doesn't really have any effect. Just another book on your shelf. Just another story that sounds nice as a dinner party to talk about the evolution of man and consciousness, fifth dimensional stuff. The actual work is the meditation, which doesn't even have to be called meditation. Just being. Just being without all the objects. Can you be, in other words, without the constant need for mental and emotional continuity? Can this mental and emotional fervor, this scum, this constant foaming, thinking, moving, be stopped for a while and rest as the fifth dimensional, silent, loving, present, harmonious being that can feel the wind and love it? Even the sound of these cars, most people would get irritated with it, but it doesn't even matter. It has a certain harmony in it. It can bring you right back to this because it's here, it's now. It's okay. All is well. This is the I that you are, the awareness that you are. I and the Father am one. Before Moses, I am, right? But Jesus supposedly has said that. People said, oh, how can you say that? Moses was much earlier than you. That's because I am always the only I. It doesn't matter out of who I'm looking, whether it's an iguana, or whether it was Moses back then, or whether it was ever. There's only one I in the universe, and it's always God. God is the very awareness that you are. And if you don't like the word God, then replace it for universal intelligence, or whatever you like. I never used to use the word God because it's such a trashed concept that it no longer has much value in our society. But for me it does have value again after many years of not using the word. Call it universal intelligence. You are the very universal intelligence. There's only one intelligence looking out of everybody's eyes, and you, which is I, am that. You will have none other than I. I am the way, the life, and the truth, right? Again, Jesus supposedly said, I am the way, the life, and the truth. Well, who was he speaking about? He wasn't speaking about Jesus, the man, as a physical body. He was talking about I, the intelligence that is hearing these words right now. I is the most beautiful word. Really, the I am is the name of God, the name of Allah, the name of the universe. Awareness is I am. Just this simple present I am. But is it enough to just rest as this I am? Is it enough to be peaceful, to be loving, to be soft, gentle, and joyous? Or do you need still more entertainment and more things to go, and more places to do, and more things to think about, filling up this empty, beautiful, silent space of God itself? And it's okay. It's not a judgment. Everybody has their addictions, and this world has an addiction to physical and mental objects. Everybody's chasing beautiful women and beautiful cars and more big houses, and the TV sells us all this nonsense as though it's going to make them happy, although we see all the movie stars and it's very clearly not making them happy. In fact, most of the richest people are the most unhappy people on the earth, despite their facade masks they put on. Some of the poorest people in the world are actually some of the kindest. They will share their house and their meals. Knock on a rich man's door, he'll probably kick you off with 2 Dobermans. And poor people sometimes share their very last meal. There's exceptions to all those, but generally speaking, this is the case. But this I is the very I, although most people don't know themselves to be this I anymore because they're constantly addicted to objects. Not just the big boats and the cars, but the objects of thinking. The constant addiction to not having, it's like a heroin addict that has to shoot up the thinking is almost every second for most people. Most people can't be still for more than 20 seconds. Sit them down on a chair, say, have no thought at all, just listen to the wind. The mind will be saying, oh, I'm listening to wind. Oh, wait. No, now I'm not listening to wind. I'm talking here. Wait, okay, shut up. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm quiet. Oh, okay, I got to do the groceries later. It's always the same thing. It's addicted. It's a heroin addict. Almost everybody on earth now is a thought addict, an object addict. Thank God that we have sleep at night to give us a natural break. But it's not a conscious break. And therefore it doesn't give you access to the 5th dimension. Sleep only gives you a break from temporary break because awareness continues. That's why you can wake up at any moment at night when you hear a tiniest noise, or when you know you have to wake up at 5 in the morning, you wake up 5 minutes to 5. You're not watching any watch. Well, awareness must still be there. A tiny little animal may walk over your foot in your bed and you're boom, and you know absolutely that something walked over your foot. Who was aware? Was awareness gone? No, it wasn't. It was just not aware of all these objects during the day of physicality and thoughts. But it was definitely conscious. That's why it knows. It doesn't even need a watch. You gotta wake up. Usually you wake up a few minutes before you want to wake up. Because awareness never goes, it doesn't even go after the physical death. But unless you become acquainted with it consciously, it is of no value when you die because you don't know anything other than these thoughts and these physicalities. And that's why it's said that to be free or to be enlightened or to be liberated is to be liberated from this constant demand of 3rd and 4th dimensional existence that demands thinking, demands moving, demands more things to do, because otherwise sitting on a chair would just bring up the restlessness, showing that we don't know who we truly are and we're unwilling to rest as the pure, silent stillness that we truly are as 5th dimensional beings. But for those who are ready, you come to a place like this, and then generally most important is to really live it. And to really live it means to be able to be willingly dying to the necessity of mental and emotional continuity.